Welcome into PFF HQ. Austin Gayle here with senior analyst Cam Mellor, a resident of Florida, now here in Cincinnati. So we're excited to talk Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With that comes with a little bit of news. Adam Schefter just breaking that Ryan Smith, cornerback, will be suspended for 4 games. That is hurting a secondary that already wasn't good last year. What do you see? What kind of impact do you see Ryan Smith leaving that 4 games for Tampa Bay?
So I think what immediately has to happen is that Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles, now flipping defensive schemes, they don't necessarily know what their secondary is going to be this year. In the cornerback position. You lose Ryan Smith, who was supposed to compete with Vernon Hargreaves for that spot. Hargreaves has not lived up to the billing. That is not quite of a surprise to any Tampa fans, even fans in Florida or fans of the NFC South. Hargreaves has not lived up to that first-round billing yet. He's a guy, yes, he was injured all of last year, but a career percentage of passes completed upon him, over 50%. He's given up a bunch of yards in coverage. He's really, really been outmanned and outnumbered by himself in that secondary as the only first-round pick from that year. But going forward, it was Hargreaves' job to lose at this point. With Smith's suspension now, you have him in the lineup for at least the first 4 games going forward, and I don't know if that's necessarily what Bucs fans wanted to hear.
Hargreaves has to step up with the suspension, and so do some 2018 second-rounders. MJ Stewart also there that didn't have a great year last year playing in the slot, and then you also have Carlton Davis, who could see some snaps outside a corner, probably be in the starting lineup if they don't start the rookies we'll speak to later. What do you expect year 2 leads from Carlton Davis and MJ Hunter, or are these guys already, do we know enough about these guys to maybe not expect that?
So we talked about it enough. The gap from college to pro is obviously a significant leap forward. So for these guys to really struggle out of the gates last year, it's not necessarily the most surprising thing in the world. But you do have a guy like Marshawn Lattimore in the division that exploded onto the scene in his rookie year. So you can see it against these big school guys like a Carlton Davis, like MJ Stewart. Granted, North Carolina isn't necessarily the biggest football school, but he had ACC quarterbacks throwing at him, and he did it well. He covered well in the ACC. Not quite so good. MJ Stewart, the 105th ranked cornerback. Carlton Davis, the 88th ranked cornerback last year out of our metrics. That's out of 131 cornerbacks. So you have lower tier guys that you're expected to rely on as now in the pass-happy NFL as your possible option 3 and 4 at cornerback, manning the slot, which is becoming ever important. I don't think that this is necessarily the secondary that Todd Bowles envisions going forward. Whether or not that happens this year or next year, even the year after that, is a different story. They have to step up, though, if they want to compete at all in the secondary.
Carlton Davis and MJ Stewart both have to step up, especially with the Ryan Smith suspension, and Vernon Hargreaves expected to underwhelm. I mean, at this point, you can almost expect that. You can't expect him to take too much of a leap at this point in his career. And I think they knew that going into this year's draft. They ended up spending 2 draft picks on pretty high-profile guys, Jamel Dean out of Auburn and Sean Murphy-Bunting out of Central Michigan. And I want to stick with Bunting first. It's a guy I had an opportunity to interview in the pre-draft process, a very smart guy. He spoke to how much film study matters and how much understanding wide receiver tendencies matters. And when you combine that work ethic and that mentality with his length and his athleticism, his speed, I think this is a guy that Todd Bowles could fall in love with. And you see reports early out of camp that he's playing in the slot. They like him as a big slot corner, something that we haven't seen from a lot of teams. But again, a lot of teams don't have a good slot cornerback. They're still looking for that recipe. I think Sean Murphy-Bunting sees an immediate jump with Ryan Smith suspended. What can we expect from Jamel Dean coming out of Auburn? I know a guy that you like, very fast guy.
It was very kind of similar situation. I covered him a lot in the college aspect there as well at Auburn. Dude's got an incredibly long wingspan, incredibly fast. And like you mentioned with Bunting, though, he has to cover the slot. They all have to. Look at the division, the opponents they go up against twice a year. You have Michael Thomas manning the slot there in New Orleans. You have Julio Jones that works all over the formation for Atlanta. You have big name guys that they have to compete against each year. They have to step up. McCaffrey in Carolina coming out of the backfield too, that these guys are going to be expected to target. Dean only allowed 40% of his passes targeted his way to be completed at college. That's SEC offenses that included the likes of a Tua Tagovailoa, big name quarterbacks in the SEC that maybe they're not quite as known for. Dean has the coverage ability. A lot of easy plays that he limited. He did everything that was asked of him at Auburn the past 2 seasons as well. So I think it's another guy that does come in, and if he plays well right away in camp, he can turn some heads in his rookie year, hopefully.
There's potential there. There's potential with Dean. There's potential with Bunting. You can hope for year 2 jumps from Carlton Davis and MJ Stewart. However, when it's all said and done, it's safe to expect that this secondary won't be in the top half of the NFL. There's not enough talent there.
Safe.
And then you look at the pass rush, you lose Gerald McCoy, you're replacing him with Ndamukong Suh, but there's not a lot of edge presence. Carl Nassib is not getting it done. Jason Pierre-Paul is a little bit long in the tooth. I think that defense is going to give up points. I want to flip to some positives while we're on the Bucs. Jameis Winston, Bruce Arians, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. There's a lot of firepower here that if they do get into a shootout, they can compete still in the NFC.
Well, you say it. Also, throw into the fact that Jameis Winston is basically, this is it for him in Tampa. He wins games, he lights up the scoreboard, and he competes against MVP caliber quarterbacks in the division, and maybe he stays around in Tampa a few more years here going forward. He has all the weapons around him. You mentioned them. Mike Evans is Mike Evans, one of the better receivers in the NFL. Chris Godwin's are primed for a breakout year this year. O.J. Howard, coming off injury, was third in yards per route run behind Travis Kelce and George Kittle. Big names, guys you want to be, talked about in the same conversation with at tight end. He has all of the tools possible Jameis does this year to go forward. And let's face it, they're going to have to score a lot of points.
And having to score a lot of points, I think, doesn't play to their benefit, but at a certain point, it allows them to be more aggressive. And if there's anything you want with Jameis Winston, it's him being a little bit more aggressive, pushing the ball downfield, and really taking on these weapons of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and O.J. Howard.
And you've seen it too with Bruce Arians specifically, though. He took a guy like Carson Palmer, a mid-tier quarterback, kind of with a high and a low aspect to his game, and turned Carson Palmer his entire career around in Arizona. And we've talked about this before with Sam as well. Is that prime right now? Is that going to happen with Jameis Winston? It's a very, very similar situation for him with Arians.
I think no matter what, you're going to see high-scoring games with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers involved, both because their defense may be a little bit lackluster, and Jameis Winston in a perfect situation to kind of have a breakout year. For more content like this, go ahead and subscribe to Pro Football Focus's YouTube channel, or better yet, check out the site at pff.com.